Not much, man. Happy Friday as always. New schedule. We got the playoff NFL schedule. Excited to do the show. 4 games. I mean, I'll miss the regular season, but at the same time, we were just talking before the show. These next 2 weeks of NFL are maybe the best of the year. It's so much fun. We have the 4 gamers. So I mean, I definitely prefer the 4 game slate. I think that's where my edge, and that's something not to just jump into the site, but we talk a lot about at Awesemo is know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and showdown is something that is a work in progress. I lean on the tools. I'll probably try to play a little of it, but I definitely prefer having a little more flexibility, not as crazy of ownership with 4 games. I don't I don't know if you are muted somehow. Josh just messaged me to say that. Um, you may be. I don't think we can hear you. People
All
can
right.
hear me though, so
Oh, okay. There we go. How's that? How's that? I think that might be better.
I think
Uh,
you might be back in business. So
nice.
I'll pass along the sentiments that you are house sitting, cat sitting. We're ready to roll. We'll get through it.
I don't know if you
It
are
is a
muted
Friday. We
somehow.
got
Josh just
four of
messaged me to
them.
say that.
How do you want to do it? You want to go game by
You may
game, or you
be.
want to just jump right into it?
Let's go game by game. First off, I want to pick your brain because I think like one of the things that you are best at. Actually, let me just shout out our sponsor Yahoo here. They have some amazing contests as always this week, and if you aren't playing over there on Yahoo, you probably should be. They had a great Christmas NBA giveaway, so just like sign up and wait for some of these contests. Even if you're not if you're just a small time player, the competition's a lot weaker. They have CSV uploads now, and they have huge overlay tournaments every once in a while. So keep your eye on those as well. PGA, they had a really good contest this week, $25 PGA contest. So of course you can claim up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points by using promo code AWESEMO. If you head on over, Emacs article is actually already out for this week, which is great. He does a weekly article that breaks down the slate for Yahoo, the Yahoo Dollar Baller, and there's a link in there. If you click on it, then you can get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points. So yeah, do it. Go over to Yahoo, play. All right, let's get into this. So you've kind of got like one of the best feels, I think, for how to build lineups in the DFS industry, like how to kind of construct things so that you're both different and you're kind of like taking some narratives into account. How does your strategy differ on a smaller slate like this? How much do you focus more on ownership? Like, do you focus less on correlation? What are you doing differently on this 4 game slate than you would on a normal main Sunday slate?
Yeah, so you kind of nailed it with when you have 10, 12, 13 games, you're really you're looking for potential game stacks, you're looking for those bucket of one-offs. There's going to be some obvious value with injuries. And when you shrink it to a Thanksgiving slate or a 4 game, we are forced to look at spots that we probably would omit on a big slate. The first thing that stands out to me is actually defense. I think what happens on these slates is people, they're funneled to a mass. All the defenses, of course, are going to be more popular than they normally would be. But with chalk defense, when you only have 8 of them, I tend to really roll the dice and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to go away. You can get leverage right there. Even the most illogical defense on a slate like this is not that far behind projections wise. So that's something I think people make the mistake of on a shorter slate is really paying for the obvious defense. And although that can work, you can get some easy leverage if you just pivot right off the bat.
Yeah, and I'm in full agreement with you there as well because these defenses, it's the most variant position in NFL DFS, and it's the hardest to project, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we all know how high variance it is. One fluke play can change it. And we've just seen time and time again. I go back to Thanksgiving when the Bears defense against Blow was, sky high. And
Yeah.
again, it's not like that can't work, but there's just other ways to go about it, whether it was the Saints or the Falcons defense in that last game. And here we have a New England defense that, of course, is going to garner some ownership. We have 7 other defenses, though. I'm sure some of them will have ample opportunities to make some big plays.
Yeah, exactly. And I was actually talking to one of our site's founders, Tom JK321, is one of the best DFS players in the world. And he said for some of these short slates, what he does is ups the maximum players against defense. So a lot of people will shy away from playing offensive players against their defense. So if you're crunching and you want to add the max up to 2 or something along those lines, I think you could even just like throw your defense in. If this is like it's a rare scenario, but like Josh Allen, probably a threat to throw a pick. Maybe you can still stack him up with a Buffalo or with I'm losing my train of thought here, but with with the opposing defense as well, right? So you might have a situation where Allen is throwing the ball a lot against a pass funnel Tennessee Titans defense, and also the Tennessee the Texans defense also comes up big. So there are scenarios in which I think that's totally in play. And, there's just also not a lot of difference between these projections and defenses. Like we have basically the top 6 defenses on the slate are projected for a difference of 2 total points. So if you have a huge discrepancy in ownership between that top owned defense and the bottom owned defense, then you're probably just better off in the long run taking that lower owned defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So a 4-game, what I really do is I try to envision a scale in the sense of you have like a 16-game slate, the most extreme. I don't even know if that's impossible on one end. And then you have a showdown, which is 1 game. Mm-hmm. On a showdown, of course, all the time, you play multiple guys. Sometimes you stack against the defense. On a 16-game slate, you would basically rarely, if ever, have your defense going against your guys. This slate is somewhat in that scale. It falls, I think, a little closer to showdown, where you can absolutely have, say, a Bill stack, and you hope that Allen has a couple turnovers. He has some fumbles. The Texans get up, and then he tries to play a comeback. He's running. That can absolutely be viable on a 4-gamer. The more games you have on a slate, the less likely I would be to do something like that. But it's a great point by you and by Tom. You want to embrace that a little on a slate like this. Don't be afraid to run your defense out against some skill position players.
Absolutely. All right, I got a couple more questions for you. I wanted to get your thoughts on, Ben. What do you do about ownership for these slates? Are you purposefully like putting in one low-owned player? Because I think like your comparison to the Thanksgiving slate is a great one. And we saw Kenny Golladay go off, and that slate was basically over 2 plays into the game when he caught that like 70-yard touchdown. And he was 5% owned or 6% owned, I think. Are you purposefully putting in like a low-owned flyer, someone like at a variant position like wide receiver where there could just be a big play, and then that's the difference in your lineup? Or are you worried about just the ownership of your lineups as a whole?
So I think people sometimes overrate individual ownerships. It's important to be cognizant of it, but you are building a lineup. The lineup has to work together. Mm-hmm. You can have a super popular guy if you know you have, if there was a player that you knew you were going to isolate, in theory, I know that's not going to happen. If you get that guy super right, you can pretty much do whatever you want elsewhere. You don't have to be as cognizant about the ownership because it works together as pieces of a puzzle. On a slate with 4 games, I do kind of worry a little more individually just because guys are going to be, the Kamaras of the world, really popular. I could see them pushing 30, 40, 50% maybe in higher stakes. So that's something, if you're going to do it, maybe you want to be unique with how many guys you stack on a team, how you run it back, and other things that can at least give you a path to victory.
Makes total sense to me. I think we're on the same page there, and glad to hear your thoughts there. Let's move it on and start breaking down these games, shall we?
Let's do it.
Houston versus Buffalo. Houston minus 2.5 total. Minus 2.5 points, 43 total in this game. That line has moved down. I believe it started at 3 and now it's down to 2.5. So a little bit of money coming in on the Buffalo side of things here. What's your general take on this one?
So this is a pretty good game in my opinion. I mean, again, we have 4, so it's not like you can just say, I don't love any of these games. We have to do something. First thing, I think it makes a small difference to note this game is inside. So we have nothing to worry about. It's in NRG. We'll talk about New England in a second. We've got Josh Allen, first career playoff start. I do think right off the bat, the thing that sticks out is they're going to run him. I know he's been mobile. He's got 9 touchdowns on the ground this year, but this is one where I wouldn't be stunned to see them have some designed runs in addition to, he loves to scramble. He's a red zone threat with that. And right off the bat, that has me interested in him. You look at his targets with Cole Beasley, John Brown. He's got, the over the top weapon. He's got the safety blanket. Texans defense, especially the secondary, probably the weakest on the slate. And I think it's a pretty good matchup for the Bills, despite being, a slight road dog. I don't think that's anything major, less than a field goal. This should be a pretty back and forth game and towards the top. I mean, we're only at 4 of them, but I like both sides of this game.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of thinking that this Buffalo side might go a little bit under owned. It looks like Josh Allen we have for about 15% ownership. And then we have Cole Beasley and John Brown. John Brown's actually getting a lot of ownership, which is a little bit surprising to me. 30% ownership at 6K on DraftKings. That's a little bit high, right?
I think just a touch. I mean, those are things that I think you can work around. And I'm going to look to some Bill stacks. I know right off the bat I certainly haven't built yet, but I like the builds those give you. You have plenty of options, whether it's DeAndre or somebody else running it back. And I do think even though it may not be the prettiest, I wouldn't be stunned to see Josh Allen have a couple turnovers. He will have volume both on the ground and through the air to give you a pretty sizable floor, in my opinion, at the QB position.
Okay, I got a quiz for you here.
All right.
Nate, can you name which player in this game has run the most routes over the past 3 weeks?
Cole Beasley.
Jordan Akins.
Tennessee. Now you got me on the Tennessee.
I know. I keep thinking it's Buffalo, Tennessee.
These tight ends for the Texans. We'll talk about tight end, of course. I wrote an article that's up on the site. Everyone can check it out, breaking down these games. And it was amazing how bad the depth is at tight end. So that is something, I guess, that's pretty interesting. He is dirt cheap. Houston,
of course, this also might have something to do with the Texans really not having much to play for. I don't know. I don't know if you can read too much into it, but just a little side note there. What are you doing? Let's just get back to the Buffalo side of things. So John Brown, obviously the top target here. Cole Beasley, the secondary target. Is there anyone else that you would stack up with Josh Allen in this Bills offense?
So I think if you're running a bunch of lineups and if you really like the Bills, if you want to try to fill, if you think Goddard and Ertz, maybe they don't have big games. If you want to go to Dawson Knox, I don't hate that. I think it's pretty aggressive. I would only do it in a Bill stack. You're going to have to get a lucky touchdown most likely. And really, it's just an opportunity cost play that you think the top end tight ends have a bad game, which is possible. But still, Dawson Knox is very live for, just a handful of points.
I like it, man. He had a touchdown catch. What was it? Last game, 2 games ago, but then it was called back. So you never know with these guys, and that's one of the positions on this slate where you might see a lot of chalk on one player, and maybe that's one of the kind of pivot points. But we can talk about just what to do with the tight end position as we go along here. Week 16 snap counts for Buffalo is Brown 96, Beasley 85%. Both of those two kind of dwarfing the rest of the wide receiver core in routes run as well. And then, of course, Isaiah McKenzie. My man, Robert Foster, got some run last week, but didn't do anything with it, unfortunately. So that was too bad. But let's talk a little bit about the Bills running game here. Do you have any interest in Devin Singletary? Looks like he's basically taken a hold of this backfield. And the only real concern here is maybe negative game script and maybe just they still continue to run Frank Gore on the goal line sometimes.
I mean, he's certainly taken control. I think early in the year, a lot of people thought it should have been sooner, but ultimately they got there. Singletary controls this backfield. He didn't play in week 17, got some much needed rest. He's going to get all the touches, can catch the ball, so I don't mind him, even in negative game script. I wish the price was a little cheaper, to be honest. It's not premium by any stretch, but it's not a discount. So again, I think he's in my Bills stacks. I think you can be creative if you want to use him with Allen in certain game scripts. I do worry, though, if you run him out alone, there is a threat to be vultured by Frank Gore around the goal line. I do think that's a concern. So I'm kind of in the middle with Singletary. He's part of this Bills offense. if you really do like them and think they can put up points, he's someone you're going to want exposure to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, will you stack Singletary? Like, are there running backs that you would stack with your quarterback, or is this like a complete no go? You wouldn't stack Allen and Singletary together.
I don't mind doing it again because it's 4 games. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to open up some not ideal correlations. He can. It's not like if they fall behind, he's going to get abandoned by any stretch. It's not as good as like if you play James White, that's a boost to Brady in a sense. Not that I'm really looking to the Patriots in that regard, but he's in the middle of that. It's not Derrick Henry Tannehill stack, but it's not Brady White either.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I think you're spot on there. I'm curious. I got one more Buffalo question for you, and then we'll move it on to the Texans. Would you, on a 4-game slate, use go naked Josh Allen?
So he is one quarterback, maybe the only quarterback when I really think about it that I don't hate that idea because he has 9 touchdowns on the ground, because there is a chance he has a pretty ineffective game and he gets you there rushing the ball.
Yep.
He's really the only one who can say that. The other positive is if you do that, you're probably going to create leverage on basically all the Josh Allen exposure because 90+% of them will have another bill because it should logically. So if you get a lucky thing where he's the only bill that succeeds, you're so much ahead of every other Josh Allen team, and that's a really unique position to be in.
Right? It's kind of like a leverage play. Like you got to figure that
Absolutely.
most of these John Brown lineups, or not most of them, but a good portion of them are going to have Josh Allen as a quarterback, or the Josh Allen lineups will have at least one wide receiver. So maybe he gets 2 rushing touchdowns, and all of a sudden you've got leverage because he hasn't passed for anything. But it's kind of a weird way to think about that because the reality is you kind of just want that highest scoring quarterback on the slate, and he's a good play, and Houston's defense has some weaknesses in the secondary there, but. Yeah, I don't know. I'm the inner Osimo in my head is saying you need to stack. So
Yeah, I mean, of course. Again, though, I want to go back to what I referenced before about it being a scale. We see showdown lineups all the time where you're just like, well, that doesn't make a ton of sense.
you're
But it's
not
one
wrong.
game and crazy stuff happens. On 16 games, yes, we do see some out there lineups, but generally you see what is a 3-man stack or something with a run back and good one-off plays around it. Here you can do some things where it's like, he ran out just his quarterback. He had the defense going against his stack. Things like that are going to work on a slate like this. You don't want to be crazy just to be crazy, but don't shy away from it either.
100%. All right, Houston. I'm guessing Deshaun Watson going to be one of the more probably like middling ownership, I guess. With we have Buffalo as kind of a run funnel defense. You can run the ball pretty well on them, but pretty difficult to pass. We have Will Fuller, who's questionable. I don't know if he's going to go or not. He's logging limited practices. It looks like he will go, but there's always just that looming threat that he'll pull something and leave the game. So what are you doing with the Texans passing attack here? We got Hopkins at one of the most expensive receivers, second most usually to Michael Thomas on the slate. We've got Kenny Stills if you believe that Will Fuller won't go, or maybe if Will Fuller does go, Kenny Stills is just like the vulture wide receiver this year. And of course the aforementioned Akins, who is leading the team in routes run. What are you doing with this passing attack?
It's it's amazing how important Will Fuller is to every single guy you just mentioned. The domino effect, not only to Stills, but to DeAndre Hopkins, who is fantastic. He's going to get work. But if Fuller doesn't play, Tre'Davious White is fantastic. I think we all know that. He is going to take Hopkins. But if they can roll additional coverage, it's going to be tough sledding. I know he's great. He can win any individual matchup. It's not to say I won't have exposure, but I do think it's a downgrade across the board if Fuller cannot keep this defense a little more honest. And right now, it looks like to me he's on the wrong side of a Q tag.
Yeah, I think that's. I think this is one of those situations where if it was a regular season game, he probably wouldn't go, and they'd sit him out. And like you're spot on there. Like he changes this offense, right? He offers that field stretcher, opens up routes underneath for Hopkins, and just adds that extra weapon that I think this offense needs. So otherwise, it's like dink and dunk to Hopkins the entire time, and that probably plays pretty well into Buffalo's wheelhouse.
And again, yeah, I mean, Buffalo has a true lockdown corner. It is a tough matchup for him. If Fuller sits, Kenny Stills is definitely going to be popular. There's no doubt about it. I get it. The targets will be there, but he's still kind of a boom bust play. The tight ends aren't going to garner a ton. And then, what I find kind of interesting is I just, at least from my perspective, I don't really see a ton of that I like here. Does that mean I don't play a lot of Deshaun Watson, who, at home favorite, to me should in theory be one of the better quarterbacks, but it's tough. I don't really love his weapons in the situation they're in against this Bills defense.
Yeah, it's a tough spot, and like the ownership isn't down on Hopkins. We have him projected for just under 25%, which is actually surprising to me because I feel like a lot of people will be likely to fade, with a tough matchup, not the greatest total in the world, a fairly high price on him, but that's not the case this week. It feels to me like a lot of DFSers are getting away from the fear of matchups and are targeting volume and opportunity at the placing a higher priority on that. And we're starting to see that sometimes with ownership, whereas I feel like in previous years, he would have been like 10% owned maybe.
The thing about Hopkins is, especially if you stack up the Bills, he's such an obvious run back. If you use Deshaun Watson, he's such an obvious pairing.
Mm-hmm.
And because he fits the mold there, I do see him still being pretty popular. I'm going to have to figure out what I want to do if I can get leverage elsewhere. But I will say that Will Fuller news is really important to monitor as we get closer to kickoff.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I think from a gambling, you have the betting show up next with Jordan Frank. I'm sure you guys are going to go over some of your top picks. But like if Fuller is out, this line has already moved to 2.5, and I wouldn't expect it to move too much more than that if he's ruled out. But I definitely like the Buffalo side of this one if he can't go. Let's wrap this up with two final guys I want to get your thoughts on. The first is the Houston tight end situation. We have Akins projected for just 5% ownership, but he's certainly gotten a little bit more run of late, possibly partly because they didn't really have much to play for last week. But he has a couple good games, a 9-target game, a 7-target game. Is this somewhere you'll go, especially if Fuller is out, or maybe that doesn't affect your decision making at all? But are you going to roster any of Jordan Akins this week?
I can see myself doing that. He has a Q tag too, so we'll see. Pending that he's good to go. Chad just brought up like if Fuller sits someone like Carter. Him and those are guys that I think are unique to Texans stacks. If you want to get Deshaun Watson and you don't want to be Stills and Hopkins like most people, you could throw in an Akins, you could throw in a Carter and change it up a little. They carry tremendous risk. You don't know, but I think that is one way to do it.
Makes sense. Final thoughts. Houston running game. Buffalo, a bit of a run funnel. They rank, I believe. Let me just pull it up here and get the right numbers in front of me. Fifth against opposing pass offenses, 18th against the run in DVOA. Will you be going to some Carlos Hyde here, or possibly a low-owned Duke Johnson, who's really getting about 40% of the snaps? It seems like more of a two-headed backfield than anything.
So Duke Johnson is someone I put in the same kind of bucket as Singletary. I don't hate the idea of using him with Deshaun Watson as a unique feel. He's certainly a better pass catcher. Carlos Hyde, I think, correlates well if you want to use the Texans defense. If you think the game is really ugly, I'm not really there, to be honest. He just doesn't do enough for me. In terms of versatility, you probably need a 2-touchdown game from him, and maybe they do control on the ground, but I honestly don't really like that narrative.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm pro. I like Duke Johnson this week a little bit. Houston, third worst in the NFL in allowing both receptions and yardage to opposing running backs, and eighth worst in 8 touchdowns allowed, which is worst in the NFL. And I feel like if you want to get a little bit sneaky here for these large GPPs, maybe you pair up Deshaun Watson with the Duke Johnson, because that's not going to be very, very highly owned.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I think you can do. And I may explore that because, again, it's you pick your quarterback and then it's, all right, what's the obvious stack? And then how do I get one-offs within the stack?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move it on. Tennessee at New England. New England up to 5-point favorites. Line opened at 4.5. New England has the second highest implied total on the slate. It's gone from 24.25 to up to 25 points. And the Tennessee Titans actually have the lowest total on the slate, 19.75, 20 points implied. So, about a 5-point advantage here. Do you have general thoughts on this one? Because I kind of sneakily like the Tennessee side of things here.
Yeah, I mean, I was stunned, to put it mildly, that the Patriots are not resting at home right now because they blew it to the Dolphins. That was unbelievable in Week 17. I don't know. I wrote about this. I believe this. I don't think it's as simple as flipping a switch for the playoffs.
Yeah.
This team obviously has some problems. I'm not saying they're going to lose at home in Foxborough, but at the same time, I'm saying that they have serious problems. Keep an eye on the weather. If there is a weather game, this is it. It looks ugly. It looks nasty.
Yep.
I think both teams are going to end up probably running the ball quite a bit. We know that Tennessee is just going to let Henry go and give him as much as possible. On the other side, we'll see what James White gives them. I think, as usual, come playoff time, it's got to be him with Edelman so hurt. I can't imagine that they don't really go to James White in a prominent role in this spot.
Well, it's fascinating because our projections actually really like Sonny Michel when you crunch. I'm getting to a lot of Sonny Michel. So that's I mean, I think both are obviously in play. They're always in play when it's the Patriots, right? Let's talk a little bit about the Patriots passing attack here, or the lack thereof. I'm surprised to see them applied for this many points. I've been I'm not a believer in this team right now, and at the risk of being proven wrong, anyone who said that over the last 20 years has been proven wrong time and time again. So it's not without its risk. Julian Edelman does have a pretty good matchup against Logan Ryan, the Titans slot corner, who is basically the worst corner on the slate. He's allowed at 950 yards this year, 6 TDs allowed. Is that somewhere you're going? Like, how much Julian Edelman are you getting to this week?
So, I mean, Edelman, of course, is in play, but this is where 4 games impact things. He's going to be more popular than I can probably get leverage on. I don't mind having some exposure, but if he is prominently owned, I'm just not there. I really think that we know he's hurt. It's just, it seems pretty clear to me that he's seriously impacted by this. They're going to be forced to go to him when you have guys like Sanu not really gelling. N'Keal Harry, I think, is interesting if you want to be different. But at the same time, I don't know how many answers the Patriots have. I do think that in this game, they're going to rely on the defense as they normally do and kind of try to grind one out against a pretty scrappy Tennessee team.
Yeah. I think it's an odd game, especially if this weather comes into play as well. So we have Mohamed Sanu has been one of our better value picks for the last few weeks. He's been running routes, getting targeted, but just kind of not producing. And I don't know if that's an inaccuracy thing on Brady's part or what. Edelman and Sanu have basically taken hold of the wide receiver jobs in this on this Patriots wide receiver core. And like you said, N'Keal Harry, third on the team in routes run. But not nothing more than really a flyer, I think, in a game like this. Julian Edelman, almost 30% ownership as well.
That's what I'm saying. I think Edelman is fine, and I get going there. I'm not getting over that number. I'm just not. So I'll let other people do that. If Edelman has one of his 12 catches, $120s, then I'll be in a little bit of trouble. But to me, there's a very real chance that he continues to have middling performances, and they rely on the backfield just a little bit more.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And really, it will be, it's going to be tough to beat a lineup where Edelman goes for like you said, 12, 120. That's always in play with him. But at the same time, if he doesn't get the touchdowns, it's not going to absolutely kill you, right? So, it's still possible to win. Mohamed Sanu as well getting ownership, actually. I'm kind of surprised at this 20%. I think it does make sense if you take a step back. The price point isn't really there, and the targets have been up. So I don't really mind going to Sanu. I'm just a little bit worried about the upside.
I think for me, the only way I'm going to get to these secondary Patriots is if I use Brady. And I don't know how often I'll do that, I'll be honest. If you're using him, you have White, you have Edelman, you have Sanu, you have Harry. I think that's really where you're looking. You're not going to use Sonny Michel in those stacks. And that to me is really it. I still tend to think that this is an ugly game, and with weather pending, I'll be hanging out in the domes. I'll let other people play outside. I'll be in Houston. I'll be in New Orleans.
I like it, man. I like it. Have that hammer on Sunday. Let's switch quickly to the Tennessee side of things here. Obviously a tough matchup against two of the best corners in the league on New England. Corey Davis, surprisingly, projected for a lot of ownership. As our own Sal Vetri tweeted out recently, he's only had 10 games of 10 or more PPR points this year. That feels like just absolute full fade to me if he's going to end up being in the 20 to 25% range. What about you?
Yeah, Corey Davis, the Patriot killer. I mean, it's not a good matchup. I do get the logic in the sense of what I think people are anticipating is that Gilmore will take away AJ Brown and maybe Tannehill has to look to the Tajay Sharp,
But
UMass alumni, and Corey Davis
JC Jackson, the
down.
other corner for the Patriots, has the number one yards per snap on the slate. And obviously he's getting weaker competition, but it's still a tough matchup for Davis. I mean, don't get me wrong. This play is a great play, but there's too much variance. There's too little upside for me to get overweight on Corey Davis at 20 to 25% ownership.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that Corey Davis is an interesting name to look at, but to me, if Corey Davis is going to be that owned, I would rather play Tajay Sharp and really roll the dice if you want to pivot away.
Damn, I like that. And that's like going to be 1% owned Tajay Sharp, I'm guessing here.
And so, I mean, I'll just say this. Do you really think that, I mean, that's an extreme, but say it's 10x in terms of ownership. Is Corey Davis 10 times as likely to outscore Tajay Sharp?
Of course.
The answer is no. No. And you're going to get your leverage. Now, more than likely, Corey Davis will outscore him. That's not the point. You're talking about this in a long-term format. And I will roll the dice there if I have to. And then, obviously, the big elephant in the room is what do we do with Derrick Henry? The guy's absolutely amazing. I really wasn't a fan of him, and I've become a fan. He's just been so fantastic. 3 touchdowns on 32 carries for 211 in Week 17 when they needed him. I mean, is he in play? Of course. He's probably the premier running back on the slate. But you're weighing playing him versus guys like Michael Thomas. That's where really salary allocation comes into play.
Yeah, that's one of the big, I think, decisions you have to make on the slate is what you're doing with Derrick Henry, because his price point is prohibitive, but that's also causing his ownership to go down. And there aren't a lot of top end plays on this slate. We're not seeing, other than Michael Thomas, we really only have one player above 8K on DraftKings, and it's pretty similar on other sites as well. So it's not quite a pay up to be contrarian spot given the matchup and given the 15% ownership, but it's close to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, Derrick Henry is someone who's going to garner interest. People are going to use him, and rightfully so. He's fantastic, but you have an opportunity cost there. And I will say, we're going to get to it in a second. I think a lot of people want to play Kamara, me included.
Yep.
Dalvin Cook is rested. They say he's ready to go. And this is a guy who was tearing through the season before he kind of got a little banged up. He is possibly the leverage in the top end running back spot.
Oh, I like that a lot. Let's move it on to that game. One final thought on this one, though. Any interest in Jonnu Smith?
No. I would rather take I would rather take a stab with passing stacks that I likes tight ends rather than a one-off, because I don't really like Tannehill in this spot.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. All right, let's before we move on to the Saints and the Vikings here, just want to tell you a little bit about some of the content we've got going on at Osmo.com. We've got a yearly golf pass. If you follow us on Twitter, that's a $250 value. You are back. Tell us what we got going on for golf this season.
Yeah, we got a ton of stuff going on. We have the shows, we have the articles. Nolan puts out the leverage tools, Alex projections and rankings. We have all that. We also have, I do want to say right off the top, we have a promo going right now. It's $1 for a week pass right now in golf. You got the Sony Open coming up next week. PGA 2020, all one word. You get in there, see what's up, and then we would love for you, obviously, to stay, buy a platinum pass once you see what we have. But it's a really exciting year. We're going to have a ton on the DFS side. I will be writing some on the gambling side, the betting side, because golf is really back in full force.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you really want to join the site and really get into it, we have 20% off Osmo Plus Platinum yearly passes. That's $200 off, and that ends on January 2nd. So make sure to go check that out as well. We have also loads of shows coming up on the YouTube channel. We got the betting show next with yourself and Jordan Frank. Right after that, myself and Osmo will be breaking down the Yahoo slate. So if you're going to play on Yahoo this week, make sure to check that out. And then, of course, we have On the Contrary with Brick75 joining Chris Baggs and Osmo breaking down the slate this week. Tomorrow, we have 2 hours of programming for you. We have Laffy, yourself, and Osmo doing the usual Sunday show on Saturdays, 2 hours before lock. And then Sal Vetri and Chris Randone will break down the live before lock on tomorrow's slate. And Sunday morning, Emac and I will be live an hour before doing the live before lock. So lots of playoff wildcard weekend coverage, and we will be rolling this over the exact same coverage for the conference championship weekend. So thanks, everyone. If you don't mind hitting that like button, we appreciate it. Helps us keep these shows free. Free premium content as well today. We got NBA ownership projections, NFL ownership projections. So go check those out right now. That's pretty sweet. And the NHL lineup builder. All right, we got about 15 minutes left. I've been talking too much, Ben, but let's break down these final 2 games here. This is kind of, even though this is the largest spread on the slate, this is kind of my favorite game from a DFS perspective, and possibly a candidate to shoot out, given that we are in a dome, and Minnesota's possibly going to be in a position to have to throw the ball and get back into this one with New Orleans about 8.5 point favorites. What are your thoughts on this one?
So I like this game. Again, it's inside. I think both teams have some opportunities. The Saints have the highest implied total on the slate. Not really a surprise there. And I will say, this is a game that speaks to what a 4-game dynamic is. I think the Saints defense is very interesting. Ooh. That's not to say that I don't like the Vikings offense either. I think you can look to a lot of situations in this game. I could see it being a little back and forth. The always going theme, though, to me, Nolan, is that when you talk about the Saints, their stack is always so expensive. When you go Breeze, Kamara, and Michael Thomas, it allocates so much salary.
Yeah, and so that's a great point, and you have to really think about how you're going to approach a slate. If you're doing like a Breeze, Thomas, Kamara stack, say, and you're bringing it back with someone like Diggs or Thielen, that's going to be very popular stack, and it's also going to force you into some really some corners that other people are likely to go, as we mentioned, like a high-owned Corey Davis or some of these value plays. So you really have to be cognizant of how you're going to fill out the rest of your lineup by using some low-owned pivots in there, at least 1 or 2, right?
Definitely, and it's just, I'm not saying this can't work because these guys are fantastic, but when you do go to a lower price total stack, you can get exposure to this game. It's just not in stack form, and that really helps you. It's like, you run a Bill stack with Kamara. Now you have a piece of the Saints, whereas the vice versa way, it's a little different when you're running it back with a one-off Bills player. I don't think that's as effective, but this is a spot. I think you have a lot of things to look to. Of course, as I mentioned, Michael Thomas, premier play on the slate. Kamara, he's talking about boomer bust. He has 3 games of 2 touchdowns on the year, and then no other games where he scored. He either scores 2 or 0, apparently. He is coming off, 2 straight games of 2 touchdowns, though.
Who is that, Jared Cook?
No, Kamara. He's got 6 touchdowns, but they came in 3 games this year.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, he was the touchdown regression candidate, and then for the last 2 weeks has been nuts, right? So we have Thomas and Kamara. I don't think those players are going to surprise anyone. No one's afraid of Xavier Rhodes anymore, so Thomas is just like, not lock button worthy at that price point, but it's really tough to get away from him. He's projected for around 60% ownership, and Kamara is not far behind, 40% ownership. 2 of the highest owned guys on the slate. So really tough to get away from them. But if you are going to roster them, you got to think about your lineup. Anyone else you like on the Saints side of things? Are you going to like a Latavius Murray at low ownership, or possibly some of these other wide receivers that haven't really done much this year, like a Ted Ginn or a Tre'Quan Smith?
It's just so hard because that's the thing. It's not one guy. There's like, you mentioned Tre'Quan, you mentioned Ted Ginn. Then they've got the other tight ends. Josh Hill contributes. Taysom Hill is the gadget guy. Jared Cook, of course, is going to garner ownership. He's a premier tight end play on the slate. It's going to be very popular. A ton of people are going to use Breeze, Thomas, Cook, Breeze, Kamara, Cook. I'm sure people will use Breeze, Thomas, Kamara, Cook all together, all those Saints onslaughts. But to me, it really is just a top-end type game where you're going to go for the high-level Saints players.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't have Tre'Quan Smith projected for very many points. He does not look like a great play in a vacuum. but his ownership, well, it's about 8%. I think though, like I think I would rather go to someone if I needed a value wide receiver to someone like him at 8% ownership. He's basically taken over as the second wide receiver, and like there's always that big play opportunity with him, right?
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt that these guys have ceilings associated with them. It's just, again, a popular game. I'm more concerned about lineup construction here than I am the plays themselves. I think the Saints guys are firmly in play at home. They
Mm-hmm.
are a sizable favorite. They have the highest implied total, as I said. And then on the other side, I do want to quickly mention Dalvin Cook. This is a guy who he's had 2 weeks off. He should be ready to go. And I mean, early in the season, it was automatic. It was 100 plus and a touchdown at least. I'm not saying that he's going to run through the Saints front, but he is going to have opportunities. And with Derrick Henry and Kamara both up there, I think that is the natural leverage spot, even though Kamara to me is much safer.
Yeah. It's the only thing that worries me about this is game script
Yeah.
and just a tough run defense. We have top 5 in DVOA, top 5 in PFF rankings, so really tough matchup for him. But like you said, he's rested. He's gonna go under owned because I think people will perceive that as a tough matchup. We're seeing him. Let me just ownership is free today, so we can just reference it at will. 15% ownership, like that's totally reasonable to me compared to say a 41% ownership for Kamara. And if you're looking at those and you're saying like is like you said earlier about Triquan or about Tajay Sharp and Davis, is Kamara really like 2.5 times likely to outscore Dalvin Cook? Probably
That's
not.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, probably not, honestly. And that doesn't mean is Kamara favorite to outscore Dalvin Cook? The answer is yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, but
That's
it's
not
like
what you're weighing though,
55,
because
45.
that's right. And the ownership discount that you get can make that a worthwhile play when you're trying to beat 60,000 people in a top heavy tournament.
Absolutely. And like we saw last time with Saints on Thanksgiving slate, Michael Thomas dudded, so you never know. What about this Minnesota passing attack? Because this is another one that might be flying under the radar a little bit. Kirk Cousins, probably not going to get much ownership as well. Adam Thielen hasn't done much since returning. He sat out for 4 or 5 weeks or something. Was just killed my fantasy teams this year, Ben. But what are we doing with this one? Because I feel like maybe one way to approach this is to go with like a Kamara or a Saints run heavy attack, and then as your bring back option in a Cousins stack. This is a concentrated passing attack when both of these guys are healthy, and it's not getting much ownership.
No, I like the spot. Like I said, I think the Vikings should be playing from behind. It's a huge boost to Diggs that Thielen is there, that Cook is there. This offense really flows naturally as a unit. I think when you start pulling guys out, it really isn't great. You think, oh, well, Diggs is going to get like a ton of targets, but they can really allocate ownership and coverage to him in terms of that secondary. I like the robustness. I worry a little about Thielen, though. I mean, he's just had
Yeah.
such a down year, maybe in cousin stacks, but not much outside that.
Yeah, like I don't. It's really tough because he's had since week 7 he's had a total of 9 targets. So it's not something that you want to like go overweight on. I don't think, and like maybe he's still hampered, but man, at 12% ownership, like it's definitely appealing, and I think I might try to get at least at weight there, or at least have him in some lineups that as a pivot point for sure. Anyone else that I missed or that you would like to mention here? Jared Cook, Irv Smith, anyone else from either of these teams?
I mean, I think again, this is going to be a common theme. If you're looking for like a cousin stack, you could look to the tight end spot, but they're really just dart throws. The big names are in this game, and that's who I plan to target.
Awesome. All right, final game of the day. We got about 10 minutes left here. Seattle Seahawks favored by, I believe, 1.5 in Philadelphia. Lots of injuries to consider here. I'm assuming we'll have a little bit more clarity as we get closer to the weekend. Of course, Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey on IR. A lot of questionables on the Philly side of things. Zach Ertz questionable. I believe he is practicing. He has yet to be cleared for contact though, so I don't know what
That
to
could
make
be
of
a
that.
problem.
Yeah, which
Oh
means
boy.
which means like so. That's a big decision on this slate. Let's talk about this a little bit because if if Zach Ertz doesn't go or is hampered, Dallas Goedert is going to be one of, if not the most popular player on the slate, certainly the most popular tight end on the slate, up against the Seattle defense, who's 30th in fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends. What are you doing with this situation?
So you just mentioned if Ertz sits, Goddard is going to be massively owned. I get it. It makes sense. Seattle, besides the Cardinals, have just been awful against tight ends. The Eagles love to go to the tight ends. I do think that if Ertz plays, though, or is at least active, Goddard's ownership is going to plummet just a bit. I still like him. They coexist just fine. They run two tight end sets. There's a very real chance that Ertz is limited if he plays. So Goddard should have work regardless. And with so many injuries, we'll see about Aguilar, but they have to utilize the tight end. They don't really have any choice.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's a great play if like somehow Ertz and Aguilar are healthy. You might want to consider a pivot off of Goddard at high ownership, because another thing, if you're playing these 4-game slates, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but a lot of people just kind of give up. They give up on a lot of their teams by the time the 4th game rolls around. They're not paying attention. How do you approach that? Are you you're obviously actively managing your teams. Do you if you have a team that's maybe not the nuts, but you've got a couple players left, are you switching maybe some of the chalkier players out to try and get leverage and get up to that top spot? Are you changing out players that you have lineups on the cusp of just cashing and getting maybe some leverage there? How do you approach it when you have the hammer or a few players left on a slate like this where it's spread out?
So that's something that I think is not talked about enough. And truth be told, I think I'm guilty of that, just like most people, where I don't. It's just. Especially if it's a smaller field, you can go in and you can figure out okay, these people in front of me, they all have Michael Thomas, or in this game they all have Lockett. I'm going to take my Lockett and I'm just going to straight pivot to DK Metcalf. Why? Because I have to. In large fields and stuff, I think it's more about risk tolerance. If you're way out of it and you're trying to min cash, you can do something. But particularly in smaller fields, obviously a cash environment, you do need to pivot and adjust those lineups on the fly to what obviously is not ideal situations. But that's because you're behind and you need to do something.
Awesome. Okay. Totally agree with you. Glad to. Also, nice to hear that you as one of the best DFS players out there do not sometimes maybe forget about.
I'm not gonna lie, it's tough.
It happens, right? You're just these teams are dead, But I'm sure it's plus EV to actually monitor and stay on top. So, okay, so let's talk quickly about this Seattle Seahawks passing attack. DK Metcalf actually leads this entire slate, I believe, in routes run over the past 3 weeks. And he is tops on the Seahawks, 111. Tyler Lockett, only 104, so not too far behind. But the perception is probably still that Tyler Lockett is the number one option. DK Metcalf could go ham here against a pretty weak Eagles secondary. Are you targeting this Seahawks passing attack?
For sure. I think that, the Eagles' strength is up front. Their secondary a little weak. And it's been more to me about volume. Lockett disappears at times. He also has boom bust games. I think he's a very interesting GPP play. He's had 3 monster games in 2019. With them out of running backs, I think Carson directly impacts both Lockett and Metcalf. Marshawn Lynch, maybe they give him something around the goal line, but this is going to be Wilson and these receivers if they're going to win this game in Philly.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't mind a Seattle stack. You can look to them. You can look to Hollister, and you have a lot of options of how to build.
And Hollister is going to be cheaper than Goddard and probably 1/10 the ownership. So there's a if you need a leverage spot, I think that's a decent pivot at the tight end position. I mean, that's your only real option there. What about this Seattle running game here? Are you at all interested in what they've got going on here? Because it seems to me like this is it's a murky backfield. It looks like Homer is the guy right now, but who knows? And of course, if the way to beat the Eagles is through the air, right?
Absolutely. You got to attack the secondary. There's no doubt about it. And this is a game, part of it is a wait and see. You have targets on the other side with Ward. They're going to use Sanders. They're going to use – I will say they have found something with this Boston Scott guy. He is like Sproles. He really is. Now, he's a little too pricey for me, but the Eagles are at least making it work with who they have. Credit to them and credit to Wentz for really being able to plug and play with some of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Boston Scott 5% ownership projected right now for the Eagles. He is priced up a little bit, but like he got the snaps last week. It was not Miles Sanders, man. Like he had 55 offensive snaps, 74% offensive snap percentage in a must-win game. So there's another place where you could possibly go to this guy at pretty low ownership. It's a pay up to be contrarian spot, and I don't think people realize how this backfield is being split right now.
No, I just wish it was a little cheaper. Now we'll have to
Yeah.
see what's up with Miles Sanders health-wise, but these are the little things that you'll have to monitor. And again, just to reiterate, a point that I didn't think we would bring up, but you did. These are the type of things you need to explore if you're really behind. Like, get off Goddard. He's going to be the premier play of the slate. Go to Hollister. That is a way where most likely it won't work, but you're out of options at that point. So that's something to at least be aware of.
100%. Final thoughts on this one. Anyone else we missed? Greg Ward's kind of priced up, but also like I think a pretty good play. Anyone else you're targeting in this game, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ward is completely fine. Wentz has no choice to look to him. I'm not going to the Seattle backs. More power to someone if they can peg Homer or Lynch, just not for me. And I think, again, you can look to any of these defenses if you want. I don't think they're going to be popular in terms of, ownership wise, and that has some appeal because random things happen, and that's really where I'll leave it with the defense.
I like it. All right, that's going to do it for us on the NFL Strategy Show. Of course, we have yourself and Jordan Frank coming up next with a betting show. After that, we got the Yahoo Show with Alex Osmo Baker and me. Then we got On the Contrary. We just got like nonstop shows. Of course, all of our usual NBA content. And starting 2 hours before lock tomorrow, we have you covered. So stop on by the Osmo YouTube channel, and we will have all your NFL DFS needs for this wildcard weekend. One of the best NFL weekends of football of the year, in my opinion. The next 2 weekends are great, so it's going to be great to sit back and play some NFL DFS. And of course, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button on the way out, we appreciate it. It helps us keep these videos free. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. Thanks, Ben. We'll see you tomorrow for some more insight.
Yeah. Take care.